Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide, the Gilgo Beach serial killings. We are embarking on a deep dive today into, well, really one of the most prolonged and haunting criminal mysteries in recent American history.
Absolutely. It's a story that unfolds over decades.
And it centers on this desolate stretch of Barrier Beach on Long Island, Ocean Parkway.
It sounds almost picturesque, beach and marshland separating the Great South Bay from the Atlantic.
But it became this secret burial ground.
Right. Authorities initially feared maybe one killer, but what they uncovered was it was much bigger, a sprawling horror stretching back, well, almost 20 years by the time the full scope started emerging.
It's that isolation, isn't it? That remote strip of sand and marsh.
Exactly. It's key. It's the kind of place where someone could pull off the road, maybe go just 20 feet into that dense thicket and basically vanish, be unseen.
The perfect dumping ground.
Tragically, yes. And the story of the Gilgo Beach killings isn't just about the grim discoveries themselves. It's also deeply about, well, the failure of institutions sometimes to connect the dots and the vulnerability of the victims.
The victims who are drawn there, or whose paths crossed with the killer, or maybe killers.
Precisely, those who ended up on that dark, quiet highway.
And the whole thing, this massive investigation, it wasn't even triggered by finding a body initially. It started with a disappearance, a vanishing act rooted in just profound fear.
We have to start there, with Shanann Gilbert.
Right. May 1st, 2010. Shanann, she was 24, an escort. She was meeting a client, Joseph Brewer, out in Oak Beach. It's a gated community right off Ocean Parkway.
Yeah, that's right. But something went terribly wrong in those early morning hours. Terribly wrong.
Her 911 call. It's chilling to listen to.
It really is. It was eventually released years later. You can hear her just screaming, clearly terrified. She says over and over, "Someone is after me. They're trying to kill me."
But she didn't wait for the police inside Brewer's house.
No. She fled, ran out of the client's house, ran to a neighbor's house, an elderly residence place nearby, banging on the door, pleading for help.
And the neighbor called 911 too.
Yes, but when that person inside told her to wait, that police were coming, Shanann just bolted again, disappeared completely into the night, into that thick, almost suffocating marshland.
Just swallowed by the darkness and the terrain. It's a complete nightmare scenario. Running from danger only to run into, well, the environment itself.
Exactly. And for 7 months, that was the focus. Authorities searched for Shanann Gilbert along that lonely stretch of Ocean Parkway.
But they didn't find her. Not then.
No. And as so often happens in these kinds of cases, the search for one missing person accidentally unearths something much, much larger, a far more shocking crime.
Right. The initial search efforts didn't turn up anything. But then came an officer with a hunch.
Yeah, in December 2010, Officer John Malia, he was working with his German Shepherd cadaver dog, Blue. They were searching, but a bit away from where Shanann was last seen.
Why there?
Well, Malia had this thought, this intuition, that if someone dumped a body, they'd likely do it somewhere accessible from the road, not deep in the marsh where Shanann had run.
Makes sense.
And Blue alerted. Right along the shoulder of Ocean Parkway, Malia had to push through this really dense vegetation, brambles and reeds.
And that's when he found it.
Yes,
Yeah.
wrapped tightly in this disintegrating burlap. A skeleton.
But it wasn't Shanann Gilbert.
No, it was the remains of Melissa Barthélemy.
That must have been an absolute shock the moment everything changed.
It was the inflection point. Instantly, law enforcement knew this wasn't just about Shanann anymore. This was something else entirely. They had stumbled, quite literally, onto a serial killer's dumping ground.
So the search immediately expanded.
Immediately. And incredibly, within just 2 days, searching just a tiny area like a quarter-mile radius from where they found Melissa, they located the remains of 3 more young women.
3 more in 2 days.
Yeah, and that discovery right there, it crystallized into this horrifying group moniker, the Gilgo Four.
Okay, let's focus on the Gilgo 4 right now. Because these 4 women, found so close together, they really established the initial pattern, didn't they? The sources point to a very specific victimology.
Oh, absolutely. The pattern was, well, chilling. A clear signature of control, maybe selection. All 4 were young women, early to mid-20s.
And their physical type?
Critically, and this really says something about the killer's preferences or maybe his limitations, they were all extremely petite.
Petite how?
We're talking generally 5 feet tall or even shorter, weighing around 100, maybe 105 pounds.
Wow. So very small individuals.
It strongly suggests the killer was choosing victims who offered perhaps the least physical resistance, a need for, complete physical dominance.
And their background, what connected them besides their physical type?
Their occupation was uniform, they were all involved in sex work, and they were using online platforms, mostly Craigslist at that time, to find and connect with clients.
And then there's the disposal method, that burlap.
Yes. 3 of the 4 were found wrapped tightly in burlap. That became this sort of awful calling card, a physical link connecting victims across different dates, despite the time gaps.
It's just planning, calculation.
It really does. A consistent process for managing and disposing of the bodies. It suggests someone organized, maybe someone who even had access to that kind of material, like burlap, readily available.
Let's go through each of these 4 women. Starting with Maureen Brainerd Barnes. She actually disappeared first, years before the bodies were found.
That's right. Maureen was the first of this group of 4 to vanish. Way back in 2007, she was only 25, a mother of 2 living in Norwich, Connecticut.
And why was she involved in sex work?
It's a sadly common story. She'd gotten an eviction notice. She needed money quickly to pay her mortgage, so she returned to sex work using Craigslist.
Her last known contact.
July 9th, 2007. She was staying at a Super 8 motel in Manhattan, called a friend, Sarah Carnes, said she was going out to meet a client she'd arranged online. She never returned.
And the forensic evidence found with Maureen. It's crucial for linking her to the later suspect.
Extremely crucial. Her body, when found years later with the others, was restrained.
With what?
3 separate leather belts, and when investigators much later used advanced DNA tech on those belts, they found something vital.
What was it?
Mitochondrial DNA on one of the belts was consistent with the DNA profile of Rex Weirman's wife.
His wife? But how? Wait, was she involved?
No, that's the key point. Prosecutors confirmed she was actually out of state, completely uninvolved at the time Maureen disappeared. The theory is what's called secondary transfer.
Okay, break that down for us. Secondary transfer, what does that mean here?
So secondary transfer is when DNA gets moved indirectly. Imagine, say, a hair from the wife is on a piece of furniture or maybe on the killer's clothes or even on the belt itself if it came from their house. Then, when the killer handles the victim or uses that belt to restrain her, that wife's DNA gets transferred onto the victim or the restraints.
Okay, so it doesn't mean the wife was there.
Exactly. It strongly suggests the killer was in contact with items from his home environment and then transferred that DNA during the crime. It points towards the victim potentially being taken to or restrained with items from the suspect's personal space, his home.
That's incredibly significant evidence. But there was also something else with Maureen's case. That strange phone call her friend received.
Yes. Sarah Carnes, the friend Maureen last spoke to. Shortly after Maureen vanished, Carnes got this very unsettling call. It was from a blocked number, a man's voice, unaccented.
What did he say?
He claimed Maureen was alive, said she was okay, just working at a whorehouse in Queens.
Did Carnes believe him?
She was suspicious. She pressed him, said if he was telling the truth, he should call back from a number the police could trace so they could verify it.
And did he?
He refused. Hung up. Never called back. It feels like a deliberate move, doesn't it? Either to mislead the police, give false hope, or maybe just a power play. Taunting.
That pattern of taunting leads us right to Melissa Barthelemy. She was the first victim actually found in 2010. Disappeared in July 2009. But the killer didn't just stop after her death.
No, Melissa's case shows this. Just extraordinary level of calculated cruelty. She was 24, used the name Chloe, lived in the Bronx. After she disappeared, her family went through hell. For 5 weeks.
What happened?
The killer waged this psychological campaign against them. Melissa's younger sister, Amanda, who was only 15 at the time, started getting these phone calls.
From the killer?
Yes. Directly from Melissa's own cell phone, which should have been deactivated. There were 5 distinct calls over those weeks.
And what was the nature of these calls? Not just silence, I assume.
Oh, far from it. They were described as vulgar, mocking, and insulting. He zeroed in on Melissa's work, asking Amanda chillingly if she was a whore like her sister.
Oh my God, that's unbelievably cruel.
It gets worse. The calls culminated with him telling Amanda flat out that her sister was dead and that he was going to watch her rot.
Just unimaginable torment for that family. It says so much about the killer's mindset.
It really does. That sustained contact, that enjoyment of their grief. It's terrifying.
But the police did trace those calls, didn't they? Even if they couldn't pinpoint the caller immediately.
Yes, and that tracing became critical evidence down the line. The calls originated from really diverse, very public locations: Madison Square Garden, other spots in Midtown Manhattan, and significantly from Massapequa out on Long Island.
So not just one place. He was moving around.
Deliberately. It showed he understood cell tower triangulation, probably. He was moving through crowded areas, likely trying to make it impossible to trace the burner phone back to one specific home or location, scattering the digital breadcrumbs.
Okay, let's move to Megan Waterman. Disappeared June 2010. She's 22, a young mother from Maine. Last seen leaving a Holiday Inn Express in Harpage, Long Island.
Right. And like the others, she'd been contacted by a burner phone.
And Megan's case provides another huge forensic link, arguably the most direct one found on the bodies themselves.
Yes. This wasn't secondary transfer like the potential wife's DNA with Maureen. This was, well, irrefutable. Years later, when the investigation heated up again, they got Rex Hoyerman's DNA.
How?
Through surveillance. They carefully recovered a pizza crust he'd thrown away in a Manhattan trash can.
And then they tested that DNA.
Yes. They analyzed the mitochondrial DNA from that pizza crust, and it was found to be consistent with the mitochondrial DNA profile from a hair. A single hair strand found embedded in the burlap that was used to wrap Megan Waterman's body back in 2010.
Wow. So a hair from the killer or someone in his household directly on the wrapping of the victim matched to his DNA years later.
Exactly. The hair was preserved evidence from the crime scene. The pizza crust provided the reference sample years later. That matched that specific mitochondrial DNA consistency. That's what really blew the case open forensically.
It turned suspicion into something concrete.
Absolutely. Connected the suspect directly to the physical evidence found with the victim.
And the last of the Gilgo Four, Amber Lynn Costellar. Disappeared September 2nd, 2010. She was 27, living in West Babylon.
Yes, and Amber was reportedly going out to meet a client who was offering a very large sum of money for that time, $2,500.
And her case provided something different but equally crucial, an eyewitness description.
That's right. It wasn't forensic, but it was vital. Amber's roommate, a man named Dave Schaller, actually interacted with the client, or at least saw him in his vehicle. He spoke to the police right after she disappeared.
What did you tell him?
He gave this very distinct description of the man. He called him ogre-like, big, imposing. And crucially, he noted the vehicle, a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche.
That's a very specific vehicle, not that common.
Exactly. Schaller also mentioned something else that the client was really pushing on the phone beforehand. Relentless, he said, insisting Amber leave right away to meet him.
So, summing up the Gilgo Four, they disappeared between 2007 and 2010. Petite women, sex workers using Craigslist, 3 wrapped in burlap, taunting calls in one case, and then these key pieces. The potential secondary DNA transfer, the direct hair DNA match, and that crucial eyewitness description of the man and his distinctive truck.
Precisely. They established the core pattern, the parameters. These details, the burlap, the victim type, the taunts, and especially that avalanche description and the DNA, became the bedrock for the renewed investigation years later. Without that consistency and the preservation of that evidence, this case might still be cold.
So the Gilgo Four were discovered in December 2010. But then just a few months later, in the spring of 2011, the horror just expanded massively.
It really did. March and April 2011. Search teams found 6 additional sets of human remains along Ocean Parkway and nearby areas.
6 more. That completely changes the picture.
It complicated everything. Suddenly, the timeline seemed to stretch way further back, possibly even to 1993. And the methods seemed different. Some of these new victims showed signs of dismemberment.
Which the Gilgo Four did not.
Correct. The Gilgo Four were found intact, just wrapped. Dismemberment suggests, well, several possibilities. Maybe a different killer altogether. Maybe the same killer evolving or needing to transport remains differently. It immediately raised the specter of multiple predators using the same dumping ground.
Let's look at some of these additional victims, especially the ones linked through geography and that disturbing method, dismemberment. The Manorville links, starting with Jessica Taylor.
Jessica Taylor's case is a prime example of how scattered these remains were. She was only 20 when she vanished back in 2003. She'd been working in D.C. and also Manhattan.
And where were her remains found?
Her torso was discovered first, way back in 2003, in a wooded area in Manorville, which is about 45 miles east of Gilgo Beach, a completely different location initially.
But then parts of her were found at Gilgo.
Yes. During the expanded search in 2011, her skull, her hands, and one forearm were recovered along Ocean Parkway near the Gilgo site. The link between Manorville and Gilgo was established.
And there was something particularly brutal about her remains, wasn't there?
Yes. Investigators noted that a tattoo on her torso had been mutilated, basically cut or scraped away with a sharp instrument.
Why would a killer do that?
It could be an act of specific rage against her or what the tattoo represented, or more likely, a calculated attempt to hinder identification, to remove something unique about her.
This pattern dismemberment, parts found in Manorville, other parts found later near Gilgo, it linked her to another victim, right? Valerie Mack.
Exactly. Valerie Mack was initially known only as Jane Doe number 6. She was 24, from the Philadelphia, New Jersey area, went missing around 2000.
And her remains followed the same pattern.
The exact same gruesome pattern. Her torso was found first, also in Manorville, back in 2000, wrapped in plastic garbage bags. Then, 11 years later, in 2011, her head, 1 foot, and both hands were discovered near Gilgo Beach.
So the killer, or killers, used the same 2 distinct dumping grounds, miles apart, for both women.
That consistency, dismemberment, disposal in Manorville, later disposal near Gilgo, was what strongly suggested a link between Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack. It pointed to one perpetrator being responsible for both.
And eventually, Rex Heuermann was charged with both their murders.
Yes. He was charged with Jessica Taylor's murder in June 2024, and Valerie Mack's murder followed in December 2024. This confirmed investigators' beliefs that the alleged killer they had in custody was active back in the early 2000s and was responsible for these dismemberment cases as well.
But the timeline didn't stop there. It went back even further, almost a decade earlier, with Sandra Castilla.
Sandra Castilla is currently the earliest known victim alleged to be linked to Heuermann. She was killed way back in November 1993.
And where was she found? Not Manorville or Gilgo.
No, completely different location again. Her body was found about 60 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach, in a heavily wooded area in a town called North Sea, also on Long Island, outside the known dumping zones entirely.
So how was she linked to Heuermann, especially after so many years?
Purely through modern DNA technology. The charge, which came in June 2024, was based on hairs found on her body back in 1993. Decades later, advanced DNA analysis matched those hairs to Heuermann's profile.
That's incredible. It just completely rewrites the timeline and the geographical scope.
Absolutely. It pushed the alleged start of his activities back into the early 90s and showed he was potentially operating and disposing of bodies across a vast 60-mile radius of Long Island, not just confined to Ocean Parkway or Manorville.
Okay, this case already involves so much tragedy, but then we have the story of the mother and child. Tanya Jackson, initially named as Peaches.
This is just one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the entire Gilgo saga. Tanya Denise Jackson. She was an Army veteran. She went missing in 1997.
Why the nickname Peaches?
She had a distinctive heart-shaped peach tattoo on her left breast. That's how she was identified for years, just as Peaches. Her dismembered torso was found back in 1997, stuffed inside a green plastic Rubbermaid container in Hempstead Lake State Park. Again, a different location, closer to Queens than Gilgo.
And she was linked, tragically by DNA, to Baby Doe.
Yes, Baby Doe. Her remains were found near Gilgo Beach in 2011, close to where Valerie Mack's parts were discovered. She was just a toddler, estimated 16 to 24 months old. Skeletal remains, wrapped in a blanket wearing some tiny gold jewelry.
And DNA confirmed the connection.
In 2025, DNA testing confirmed this little girl was Tatiana Dykes, and she was Tanya Peaches Jackson's daughter.
Mother and daughter, both dismembered, found miles apart, years apart.
It's almost incomprehensible. It paints a picture of just extreme violence control and a complete, terrifying lack of empathy.
But have Tanya and Tatiana been linked to the main suspect, Heuermann?
As of now, no. They haven't been publicly included in the charges against him. They remain part of this larger, deeply unsettling puzzle of Ocean Parkway. Were they victims of Heuermann using a different, perhaps even more brutal method? Or is this evidence, strong evidence, of a separate killer operating in the same areas? We just don't know for sure yet.
And there are still other unidentified or recently identified victims, Karen Vergata.
Karen Vergata, also known as Jane Doe number 7 for a long time. She went missing in 1996. She was 34. Seems she might have been involved in sex work, but apparently her disappearance was never formally reported back then.
And her remains were also scattered.
Yes, again showing that pattern of geographic dispersal. Her severed legs were found first, washed ashore on Fire Island, wrapped in plastic, in April 1996. Then, 15 years later, during the big 2011 search, her skull and some teeth were found miles away at Tebay Beach in Nassau County, west of Gilgo.
How was she identified?
Through genetic genealogy, finally, in 2023, again, technology catching up decades later. Her scattered remains mirror the Manorville cases, suggesting a killer comfortable with moving body parts over distances.
And finally, the very unique case of Asian doe.
This is another deeply puzzling one. These remains were found in 2011, actually quite close to the original Gilgo 4 cluster. The victim was biologically male, young, estimated between 17 and 23.
And the cause of death.
Blunt force trauma. But the really distinguishing factor was that the victim was found wearing women's clothing. This suggests they were perhaps a cross-dresser or maybe a transgender woman.
Any idea of ethnicity or identity?
Forensic analysis indicated likely Han Chinese ethnicity. Composite sketches showing both male and female presentations were released in 2024, hoping someone might recognize them. But as of now, their identity is still unknown.
And also not linked to Hoyerman.
Correct, not currently linked to the charges against him. This victim, along with Karen Vergata, Tanya Jackson, and Tatiana Dykes, keeps that question alive. Was Ocean Parkway a dumping ground for just one prolific killer, or did multiple predators see its desolate nature as an opportunity?
So we've covered 10 victims eventually linked to Rex Hoyerman through charges, plus these other tragic cases, Tanya Jackson, Tatiana Dykes, Karen Vergata, Asian doe, still unresolved. But we have to circle back to where it all began. Shannon Gilbert, her frantic 911 call kicked off the search. Yet her death is still officially listed as undetermined. Why?
It remains one of the most contentious points of the entire investigation. The official ruling by the Suffolk County Medical Examiner has been this source of immense debate and pain for her family.
Where was she found, relative to the others?
She was found 19 months after she vanished, deep in that Oak Beach marsh. About half a mile from where she was last seen frantically running, but importantly, about 9 miles west of where the Gilgo 4 were discovered clustered together.
And the official cause of death?
Accidental drowning or possibly death from exposure. The theory put forth was that she panicked in the dark, got lost and disoriented in the incredibly thick, swampy marshland, and eventually just succumbed to the elements or drowned in the muck.
But her family and independent experts, they strongly disputed that finding, right?
Absolutely. Shanann's mother, Mari Gilbert, who fought tirelessly for years, hired Dr. Michael Baden, a very well-known independent forensic pathologist, to perform a second autopsy in 2014.
And what did Dr. Baden find?
His findings directly contradicted the official ruling. He noted damage to Shanann's hyoid bone, that's a small U-shaped bone in the neck.
And damage there suggests.
It's often fractured during manual strangulation. It's not conclusive proof on its own, but it's highly suggestive of foul play, not accidental drowning.
Anything else?
Yes. Dr. Baden also pointed out that her body was found lying face up in the marsh. He stated that's statistically less common for drowning victims who are often found face down.
So, suggestive evidence of strangulation, the position of the body, and that terrifying 911 call where she's screaming someone is trying to kill her, yet the official finding remains undetermined.
Correct. Despite all that, the official cause of death has never been changed. There's this persistent feeling, especially among advocates in the family, that her death was somehow minimized or not investigated as thoroughly, perhaps because she was the one who initially sounded the alarm, the one whose actions led to the discovery of all the others.
It feels connected to the larger problems, the institutional failures that really seem to plague this case for such a long time. It's baffling how, even after finding 4 bodies in late 2010, the case essentially went cold for over a decade.
Baffling is one word for it. The sources point to what can only be described as a catastrophic failure of interagency cooperation, coupled with, frankly, a degree of institutional arrogance.
Specifically, the local police versus federal agencies.
For years, the Suffolk County Police Department actively resisted help from federal agencies, especially the FBI. The FBI has specialized tools, analytical capabilities for complex cases like this, cell tower data analysis, linkage mapping, things that were desperately needed.
And this resistance wasn't just procedural red tape. It was driven by someone specific.
It appears largely driven by one very powerful figure at the time, former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke.
Ah, yes, the Burke factor. His story is almost a sidebar of corruption in itself.
It really is. Burke didn't just block the FBI's involvement, which critically hampered the analysis of evidence, especially that burner phone data when it was freshest. His own career ended in utter disgrace.
He went to prison, didn't he?
Yes. He was indicted and eventually imprisoned in 2016, but for unrelated charges, beating up a handcuffed suspect who had stolen items from his car and then orchestrating a cover-up within the department. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice.
So his insistence on keeping the Gilgo investigation purely local, keeping the FBI out, it looks incredibly suspect in hindsight.
It demonstrably hindered the investigation for years. Many believe that if the FBI had been given full access to all the evidence, particularly that complex cell phone location data back in 2011 or 2012, the breakthrough that finally came in 2022 might have happened a decade sooner. Lives might have been saved.
And alongside the institutional failures, we can't ignore the impact of victim stigma, can we? The fact that most of these women were involved in sex work.
It's an undeniable and frankly heartbreaking systemic issue in this case, and many others like it. Criminologists, victim advocates, they consistently point this out. Because of their profession, their disappearances were often initially treated differently by law enforcement.
Also,
They might be classified as voluntary missing, or runaways, maybe just assumed to have moved on, rather than immediately suspected as victims of foul play. Families, like Melissa Barthelomy's sister, trying to report her missing, faced immense struggles just getting police to take the situation seriously at first.
and that delay gives the killer a huge advantage.
It gives them time, operating room, years in this case. That initial dismissal, that societal judgment bleeding into police procedure, allowed the alleged killer, or killers, to operate without the intense, coordinated scrutiny that should have happened much, much earlier. Justice really had to wait until new leadership came in and made a conscious decision to prioritize the case, regardless of the victims' backgrounds.
And that change finally happened.
Yeah.
February 2022. A new task force was put together, new leadership. They took a fresh look at everything.
Exactly. New eyes, new determination, and crucially, access to both the old evidence and much more advanced modern technology. The strategy was basically reopen this cold case as if it were brand new and combine everything: old witness statements, original police reports, and cutting-edge digital forensics.
And it yielded results quickly this time.
Remarkably quickly, the new district attorney, Ray Tierney, stated publicly that Rex Heuermann was identified as a prime suspect within just 6 weeks of this new task force getting underway.
6 weeks. After 12 years of relative inactivity. That's astounding.
It shows what focused effort and the right tools can achieve. The breakthrough came from connecting 3 key pieces of information that had existed for years and hadn't been properly linked to one suspect.
Okay, what were those 3 pieces?
First, they went back to that crucial eyewitness account from Amber Costello's roommate, Dave Schaller, his description of the client's vehicle.
The dark green, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche.
Precisely. It's a distinctive truck, not something you see every day anymore. So the task force started cross-referencing registrations for that specific make, model, and color in the Long Island area.
Okay, that's piece 1. The truck. What's piece 2?
Piece 2 was revisiting all that burner phone data. The disposable phones used to contact the Gilgo 4 victims. They knew these phones were used, but linking them definitively was the challenge.
And this is where the FBI's earlier work, the concept of the box, came back into play. Explain that for us again.
Right. The FBI analysis, done way back around 2012, but perhaps not fully utilized by Suffolk County PD under Burke, had determined something critical. Even though the killer made calls from public places like Manhattan, the burner phones themselves, over the years, consistently pinged off cell towers within a very small, specific geographical area on Long Island, a tight radius.
Where the phones presumably rested, or were primarily located, when not actively being used for those calls.
Exactly, near the killer's home base. This small cluster of cell tower coverage in Massapequa Park, Long Island, became known informally among investigators as the box.
So piece 1 is the specific truck description. Piece 2 is this specific geographical box derived from cell tower data linked to the burner phones. What was the third piece that brought it all together?
The third piece was simply putting 1 and 2 together. Investigators found a registration for a dark green, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. And the registered owner of that very distinct truck lived at an address located directly within that small, specific cell tower radius known as the box in Massapequa Park.
And that owner was Rex Heuermann.
That owner was Rex Heuermann. The convergence of the unique vehicle description and the highly specific cell tower location data pointed squarely at him.
So who was this man, Rex Heuermann? On the surface, not the typical image of a serial killer, perhaps.
Not at all, which is often the case. He was 59 years old at the time of his arrest. A licensed architect in Manhattan running his own firm, RH Consultants and Associates, since 1987. Lived his whole life in Massapequa Park, in the same modest house he grew up in. Married, with 2 children.
But physically, did he match the description?
Neighbors described him as a large, imposing figure, over 6 feet tall, which lined up perfectly with Dave Schaller's ogre-like description from back in 2010. It fit that classic chilling pattern, the apparently normal suburban life masking alleged horrific secret activities, compartmentalization.
And once they had him as a suspect, the digital evidence started piling up.
Oh, massively. They put him under surveillance, got warrants for his digital accounts. His email account, for example, was allegedly traced to just a flood of disturbing online searches.
Like what?
Searches for, and these are direct quotes from the investigation documents, sadistic materials, child pornography, and perhaps most damningly, specific searches for images of the victims and their relatives.
He was searching for the victims and their families.
Allegedly, yes. It suggests he was actively tracking the case, maybe even reliving the crimes or monitoring the family's grief online. It's incredibly brazen.
And his own phone records. His personal phone, not the burners.
His personal cell phone records placed him physically in Massapequa Park, near his home, or in Midtown Manhattan, near his office, at the very times the burner phones were being used to contact the Gilgo 4 victims years earlier. It corroborated the timeline and the locations derived from the burner phone data.
So the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming.
Yeah.
But they needed that final definitive link, the DNA takedown.
Right. They needed his DNA to compare directly against the evidence found on the victims, specifically that hair on Megan Waterman's burlap wrapping.
And that's where the pizza crust comes in.
Exactly. Meticulous surveillance work. Detectives followed Hoyerman in Manhattan. They watched him discard some items, including leftover pizza crusts, into a public trash can. They covertly retrieved those items.
And the lab went to work.
Yes. The DNA extracted from that discarded pizza crust was compared to the mitochondrial DNA profile from the hair found on Megan Waterman's burlap back in 2010.
And it matched.
It was a match. Consistent mitochondrial DNA. Later, after his arrest, a court-ordered cheek swab provided a full nuclear DNA sample, which confirmed the match absolutely. That was the prosecution's cornerstone forensic link.
It keeps coming back to this idea of careful planning, compartmentalization. The timing of the murders seems crucial, too.
Extremely. The investigation suggests a pattern. The alleged murders primarily occurred during periods when Hoyerman's wife and children were confirmed to be out of state.
Where'd they go?
Often traveling internationally, sometimes visiting family in Iceland, for example. These trips provided him with a window, the house to himself, the opportunity and privacy to allegedly commit these crimes, manage the remains, and dispose of them without his family being present.
So that explains the potential secondary transfer DNA, like the wife's DNA possibly found on Maureen Brainerd Barnes' restraints.
Precisely. Investigators concluded that any hair matching his wife or daughter found near the victims was likely due to secondary transfer hair shed naturally in the home environment, transferred onto items he used or onto the victims themselves. Because the family members were physically absent during the critical time frames of the disappearances, their DNA presence points back to the crime originating from, or involving items from, his household environment during a time when he had sole access to it.
Since Rex Hoyerman's arrest in July 2023, the charges against him have steadily expanded, really painting a picture of an alleged criminal career spanning decades. Can you walk us through that indictment timeline?
Sure. It started in July 2023 with the initial arrest. He was charged with 3 of the Gilgo 4 murders. Melissa Barthelemy, found first, Megan Waterman, the DNA hair link, and Amberlynn Costello, the eyewitness description.
But not Maureen Brainerd Barnes initially.
Not initially. Her charge came a bit later, in January 2024. That completed the indictment for all 4 women found clustered together back in 2010.
But then the timeline started stretching much further back.
Yes, significantly. In June 2024 came 2 major additions, pushing the timeline way back. He was charged with the murder of Sandra Castilla, who was killed back in 1993, and also charged with the murder of Jessica Taylor, who disappeared in 2003, one of the Manorville dismemberment victims.
So suddenly the alleged activity spans from the early 90s to the early 2000s.
Exactly. And then, most recently, in December 2024, he was charged with the murder of the other Manorville victim, Valerie Mack, who vanished in 2000.
So as it stands now, he's charged with the murders of 7 women.
7 women, yes. Spanning from 1993 with Sandra Castilla through the 2000s with Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, and up to 2010 with the last of the Gilgo 4, Amber Costello.
It completely reframes the narrative, doesn't it? From the Gilgo Beach killer focused on that one stretch of highway in 2010 to something much broader.
It absolutely does. It suggests, if the charges hold, a long-term, highly mobile predator who allegedly used multiple disparate locations across Long Island, North Sea, Manorville, Gilgo Beach as disposal sites over nearly 3 decades.
And the different methods. Intact versus dismemberment.
It shows a capacity for both, which raises questions. Did his methods evolve over time? Or did he choose different methods based on the victim, the circumstances of the murder, or the chosen disposal location? We don't know yet.
But even with 7 charges against Hoerman, we have to reiterate. The initial fear, the possibility of multiple killers using Ocean Parkway, that hasn't entirely gone away, has it?
No, it hasn't, and it's crucial to remember that. Authorities have been careful to state this. The remains of several victims found in that area have not been publicly linked to Rex Hoerman through charges.
Specifically.
Specifically, Asian Doe, the unidentified young male found in women's clothing. Karen Vergata, identified via genealogy, remains scattered on Fire Island and to Bay Beach. Tanya Jackson, Peaches, torso found in Hempstead Lake Park. And her toddler daughter, Tatiana Dykes, baby Doe, found near Gilgo.
So their cases remain open, potentially unrelated to Hoerman.
Exactly. The different disposal sites for some, the different victimology, like with Asian Doe, the specific circumstances, it all keeps the door open to the possibility that Ocean Parkway's isolation attracted more than one predator over the years. This case, even with the main suspect charged for 7 murders, might still have other layers, other perpetrators yet to be identified.
It's such a complex, tragic story. And when you look back at the very beginning, Maureen Brainerd Barnes disappearing in 2007, if things had gone differently then.
You have to wonder, this case is a stark illustration of how societal biases, particularly against victims involved in sex work, can inadvertently protect a predator. If Maureen's disappearance in 2007, or even Shannon Gilbert's absolutely terrified 911 call in 2010, had triggered an immediate, full-scale, coordinated investigation, one not hampered by interagency squabbles or the alleged prejudices or corruption of police leadership at the time,
He might have been caught much sooner.
it seems highly probable. The tools, the clues, they were there or emerging. Technology eventually forced the issue, provided the undeniable links. But that decade-long delay, it likely costs lives.
So the question we really need to leave our listeners with, reflecting on this whole horrifying saga, is pretty stark, isn't it?
It is. When we allow bias or institutional dysfunction to delay or diminish the investigation into the disappearances of the vulnerable, the missing, as they're sometimes called, how many preventable tragedies are allowed to accumulate in the shadows? How many lives are lost while we wait, sometimes for decades, for technology or a change in leadership to finally compel us to find the truth?
The Gilgo Beach case serves as this devastating reminder, doesn't it? That internal conflicts, prejudice within systems meant to protect, they can become a serial killer's greatest ally. They give him time.
The technology caught up, the clues were eventually pieced together, but the will, the focus, the acknowledgement of the inherent worth of every single victim, that seemed tragically absent for far too long.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.